selling houses, I'm helping people find apartments, and I was miserable. I had money, but I was barely seeing my child. I was not making any music. And my ex-husband called me one day and he said, look, I didn't support you in our marriage, but why don't you let me support you now? Let me have our son. Let him come home with me to North Carolina.
What's up, everybody? It's Willie and Alex from the Black Culture Podcast. I know you're ready to get into this video, but before you do that,
make sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the Black Culture Podcast.
Enjoy the video.
Sometimes we as African Americans, we go into places thinking that we have to adjust and adapt the way we speak.
Yeah, white people don't have to code switch.
We just said that. Yeah,
there is no such thing as a code switch definition for a person who's of white Anglo-Saxon, orientation. But I'll say this much: there's certain generations of us, and also people from a certain geography who have certain experiences with hair, and he's Southern. This is horrible because this is not indicative of all Southern Blacks, but he's old school Southern Black. And for them, polish and shine means everything. For a long time, they were trying to outlive the fact that they could run fast and play the fiddle. Being a musician, being an entertainer, all those different things were negative. And some of them still speak badly about that. That's not something to want to aspire to be. And so you have folks who, I went to college at North Carolina Central University, and I have friends of mine whose parents threatened to throw them out of their house because they decided to lock their hair and thought they were converting to another religion. It's amazing what we have tied up in hair. I mean, recently we had a Black girl spray paint her hair with Gorilla Glue to make sure that she had the polished look so she could be the perfect ideal, in the presence of the children that she taught.
I've not heard anyone go there. That was a great point. I've never heard anyone use that point that you just made. I never even thought of it like that.
Think about our beginnings and how important it was for us to be seen a specific way by certain people, particularly white. We wanted to be seen as equal, not accepted for what we are, but equal so that we could get into these white spaces. And so you have folks who, nearly burned their scalps with lye and pressed their hair out and burned the back of their necks to make sure that they could get into certain spaces. Certain Black churches would not let you in if you had a particular curl pattern or a specific complexion. Some of these the vestiges of like triggers and, terrorists still exist in many of us. Like telling him that is not an act of love. He thinks he's loving him,
right?
But it's self-hatred.
I read this book my father gave me called Our Kind of People. And talk about the Black elite all over America. And a lot of them were here in our city, and you weren't getting into, and these were Black circles from the Lynx to 100 Black Men and all of that. You weren't getting in unless your skin was a certain color. And as a kid, both of my grandparents were white. I mean, not white, very light, right? In fact, my grandfather had blue eyes. I remember them telling me, get out the sun, because it's too dark, and they were
get that too dark.
Yeah, and they were from the deep South. So when they moved up north, they carried that mentality with them. And so a lot of us, our parents, our grandparents, uncles, they think that we still have to cower to white society and white privilege. And I'm like, no, you don't, because guess what? The more and more you do that, they're never going to learn who we are. The more and more that we go in thinking we got to talk a certain way, wear our hair a certain way, dress a certain way, they're not going to get used to how Black people are. And then you go on to the next person, that person thinks they got to come in and do the same thing when we should not have to.
Well, I think what's incredible right now is that we've never been in a better time to be unapologetically Black in all those things that it means. But now as we do that, we should be concerned about what we're saying. So if I'm gonna wear my locks, then they have to be polished. Like I heard you gentlemen talking about that. And so my son, who's 9 years old, is locking now. And I have the same conversations with him. I said, look, when you walk into the school, and he goes to predominantly white school in Atlanta, Georgia, and he's wearing locks. And so I said, when you walk in there, be who you are, but make sure that you are the best of who we are as you do it. Wash your hair, oil those locks before you walk in there, represent yourself like you care about your details. For yourself, because ultimately you are representing something that's unseen You are the first in line to show somebody else that this can be done the way you're doing it. And if anybody tries to make you feel like there's something wrong with you, you continue to lift your head up high. But there is a certain way that I feel like we need to continue to present ourselves as we present our unapologetic selves.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to have to get into something. And I remember I was talking to a guy I used to work with, Black dude, but he sent his son to a predominantly private all-white school. And he was like, yeah, man, my son came home with a white girl. I said, what do you expect? I said, send him to school with all these white kids. Attraction is attraction. So I got to ask you, Atlanta is considered Black Mecca. What was the reason for you sending your son to a predominantly white school?
Well, I'm a co-parent, so I share a child with someone. And my partner thought that it was the best.
Miles, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, okay. My baby boy Miles. I'm lucky. My son is unapologetically Black. He's not the dude who's code switching in there. And we're blessed that he does go to a school that's more, let's say, more of considered a hippie school environment where they call their teachers by their first name. I don't know how I feel about that. But he's even gone as far as to say, I don't want to be called by the name Miles in this environment. I want everybody here to call me Kofi, which is his Ghanaian name. So he is the one fighting and making sure his identity is sticking. Now, it's he and one other Black girl in his class of 7. So you can imagine that there are little girls that my son likes who are not Black girls. I think he's cognizant of that. He's the guy that likes the exoticals in his class. I don't know. I feel like this, and it's an ongoing conversation I'm having with myself about race all the way around. What type of world do I really want to live in? And in that world where I want people to see me as human, isn't the greatest example of that actually happening people who see one another and they don't see each other in that way, and they decide to love in spite of whatever, in spite of color, in spite of class, in spite of orientation, whatever that may be. Don't I want that for my child? In the same breath, I also make it my responsibility to make sure he's in rites of passage programs during the summer, that he gets a steady diet of beautiful Black girls and women in his life. So he's a rainbow coalition of love, but that's because I recognize it's my responsibility to keep him immersed in the culture from which he comes from. Last year, I took him to Ghana, where he got his naming ceremony, and met all of his Ghanaian family members and sat and hung in company with his Ghanaian family. And he came back Kofi. That was his choice. And every day and everywhere he goes, he knows that that's who he is. I think it's really the responsibility of the parents to make sure that their children are exposed to beautiful Black spaces, which are the best representation of a mirror of themselves. Then you can raise an unapologetically Black child in an all-white school, and it doesn't really matter.
Willie, I told you it's gonna be fire, man. So look,
she literally just like when we had conversations about building the foundation, she literally just gave an example of what she's doing to build a foundation.
Yeah, to build a foundation. So we're gonna get into you. We gotta tell you, we've been looking forward to this interview for 2 weeks.
Yes, me too. And I'm so sorry we weren't able to do the other one. I'm just glad we're together now.
I am. Absolutely. I'm glad we're together. And I gotta tell you, we listened to you on Clubhouse last night, and I listened to your album, and I gotta tell you, that album is a vibe.
Oh, thank you.
That album is a vibe. The ceremony, it took me on a journey. And so tonight we want you to take us on a journey. We want to dig into YahZarah St. James. But before we do, let's toast it up.
Absolutely. Let's. Cheers, y'all.
Cheers. So let's get into it. Considered by many music insiders to possess one of our generation's greatest voices, YahZarah has simultaneously been compared to Minnie Riperton, Grace Jones, and Tina Turner. Wow. YahZarah's performances are effortlessly electric. She encompasses the tenderness of Adele and the fierceness of Stevie Nicks. She is a diva with healing power. She is the archetype of an urban pop Joan of Arc with the audacity of Prince. She has shared the stage with The Roots, Anderson Paak, Bilal Oliver, Alice Smith, Chance the Rapper, and toured with Lenny Kravitz. YahZarah St. James, welcome to the Black Culture Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here with y'all.
So take us on a journey. Who is, now I read your bio, and whoever wrote it needs a Grammy on their own, but tell us, who is YahZarah St.
YahZarah is her mother's only daughter, a daughter of DC, but a child of Ghana, West Africa, a mother. I've been a midwife, meaning as a collaborative partner musically to a lot of people's favorites. And so I'm some people's favorite singer. YahZarah is a spiritualist who understands that my gifts are divine, and so I've never had to have a persona in order to wield them. And YahZarah is a person who I think is born to love, and that's the essence from which my music comes from.
Wow. So take us back to the beginning. You have a really interesting story. Ghanaian American. Your dad was from Ghana, right? So what was it like growing up in that setting and also discovering your musical talents?
It's interesting that you would ask me that. I did not meet my father till I was 14 years old. The first man who raised me, the first man who I fell in love with as my father, was a gentleman who was a former member of the Black Panthers and later a member of the Black Liberation Army, who in the 80s realized that he hadn't been trained to do anything that was going to feed his children, and enrolled into the army and flew his daughter to Germany, where I lived in the 80s pop era, and got a chance to fall in love with George Michael and Tina Turner and Chuck Mangione and Angela Bofield and Parliament Funkadelic and Sly Stone and Jimi Hendrix while listening to his records. He taught me how to put the needle on the groove when I was 5 years old so I could listen to records. And he's the man I call father. He was not a perfect man, so I was in a household of abuse, but my solace became music. And my mother, who loved music and wanted to be a singer herself, always allowed me to be free to perform that music and to be in spaces where I could kind of be free to just discover that art was healing for me, whether that was dance or theater or voice. I was in an environment where I was really encouraged to bloom into what I am by my mother and my father, at least in my early life. And growing up in that household with, this beautiful soul, which is my mom, whose mother was a concert pianist who gave up music when she was pregnant with her, who allowed me to live out my life, was really, really special. My mom, when she was 12 years old, asked my great grandmother if she could learn how to play the piano, and she went and got the family axe and chopped the piano to pieces because she was so heartbroken about my grandmother getting pregnant with her and having to give up her scholarship for music. And so I guess growing up in my household, I was really blessed to have somebody who just didn't want me to be a victim of oppression, like generational oppression, passing the hurt, passing the pain, put me in a position to win by just letting me pursue what made me happy.
So do you feel
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, you definitely answered my question.
Man, that was so it's pretty much like the generational, as I call it, because I try to make sure I'm doing this with my family. It sounds like the generational curse was, he didn't allow that to get to you. And it seems like now, we were talking before we started, that now you're installing that in motherhood now, making sure what you learned, you're taking it to cater to your son, to make sure, to build the foundation, to make sure he can be the best version of himself. So,
absolutely.
So explain to me, like how did you really how did music affect you positively? Like, was it, you said it was your way to get away, to get out. So just explain that passion for music. Like when you're getting ready to write a song, or you're getting ready to, what's on your mind when you getting ready to write a song, or what's going on in your mind?
You know what? If I can interject, Willie, just to go along with your question.
Go ahead.
She said it was a way for her to get away, but get away from what?
To get away from what? So And it's funny, you know, when you tell these stories, especially when you're beyond them, you know, I don't want to tell them in a way where I'm like still attached to the experiences. I want to speak about them in a way that speaks of me being victorious over them. But I was a bullied child. And I also, growing up in Washington, D.C., after returning from being in Germany, which was such like a nurturing environment, despite the things going on between my parents, you know, in their own marriage, I was in a nucleus of like real love, you know, taking dance, being celebrated for my gifts, being told I was beautiful by Germans and all the people on my base, and just people who appreciated me for my mind and how articulate I was, and that I loved books. And then coming back home to DC and being discriminated against by my own people because of the color of my skin, and having very deliberate and horrible things done to me by other children and adults because of phrases like this, which I heard was stop acting like you're light skinned. Stay in your place. I mean, I could get into the specifics of things, but let's just talk about being thrown down steps and your locker set on fire for being too articulate. These were my experiences, and it was racism. It was skin on skin violence by my own folk. And so when I would sing, people would listen and people would treat me as if I was important to them. Early on in church, I would sing and it would fill me up with a very specific feeling, because I knew I was being used to do something great. And at the time, in other spaces, I wasn't being told I had anything great to contribute. And so singing was an aspect of something that filled my personal intention and made me feel like I was good at something. The arts do that for children. And I feel like in that way, music saved me. When I was in church, I recognized my voice had a power to change a heart. When I was on stage, I recognized that made me feel good, because it was something I was rewarded with positive reinforcement for, not the rest of what I was. So that was the thing to get away from, the part where I was invisible because of my color in spaces of color.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. And I feel like you are healed from it, but there's so many of us still going through that.
Yes.
Unfortunately, you know, what's funny, growing up as a young Black man, I never realized what young Black women went through, right? As Black men, we're not necessarily told that. And my mother's dark skinned, so, you know, she grew up in the 60s and 70s. And so I can only imagine what she went through. But,
absolutely.
Right? So, you know, I feel like when those stories are shared, it enlightens us. And now I pay attention. And I would say probably within the past 5 years, a lot of the things that's been going on with women behind closed doors, us men don't necessarily know about it if you're not directly involved. And so now that's opened up my eyes to see further than just what's on the surface. You know, this is why someone may act the way they act, or why they might be discouraged about this or affected by it, right? So your music, and I noticed, especially when you're on Clubhouse, you pay particularly close attention to your energy, don't you?
Yeah, I've learned. You know, I mean, I was talking to a good friend of mine who's younger than me about how over time you start to recognize how to use your energy, what deserves your energy, you know, and also who it's a benefit to be around because they lift the vibration of your world. I'm very deliberate about curating my friendships and about my space.
So high school now, right? Let's delve back into high school, because I feel like you recognize your gift early, you use it as a healing mechanism, but now are you at this point seeing it as a career?
You know, it's so interesting. I think I always knew that in some way I would be connected to the arts. I thought I was going to be a dancer. I was a ballerina for a long time. I was in a couple of dance companies. I danced until I graduated from high school, but I always sung. I sung in church, I sung at school, and then of course I ended up getting a full invite to go to Duke Ellington School of Performing Arts, which is a public school for me since I lived in DC. And I was so happy to finally be in space with people who were like myself that I got there 3 hours early, my first day of school, and cried on the front steps like a big old baby, because I was in space with the other weirdos. You know what I mean? And I was an awkward Black girl who loved art and loved rock and roll and loved, soul music and wanted to sing opera. And I was finally home. I had actually started cutting school at my junior high school, Alice Deal, and spending so much time at Duke Ellington before I went there that I'd already starred in one musical before I started going to the school. No one asked any questions. And I ended up starring in their play there. So it was a turning point for me, because I was someplace where I could use that thing that made me not be invisible to truly bloom.
What did you do in that performance? And when you say you were in the play, what did you do?
Okay, so Duke Ellington was the breeding ground for so much amazing talent. I had a friend of mine named Rakis Petrie, and he was an older kid in the school who wrote a play called Melindy, which was a modern day adaptation of Cinderella. It was a Black Cinderella. And so I played Melindy. And it was amazing. I did some real acting. Like I got my evil stepmother slapped the shit out of me on stage, and it was a slap her around the world. And, I really had a chance to dive into theater and to sing and to discover that I could do that too. And so I'm very excited about doing more than that. That's why it was so much fun to do, to play the part of Dorothy in The Wiz, because I always wanted that role.
So this was before Brandy did it, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, Melindy was a play written by this young man himself, actually, in the school. So, I mean, there have been lots of different adaptations of Cinderella, but this one is Black. But this one is Black as fuck, specifically. Gospel, dysfunctional family members, very specific issues of everything from drugs to violence, where this girl was dealing with really specific things and then had her dreams come true. And I really loved the way that he wrote it. She was an orphan. Her father died, just like the original Cinderella, but she had, this evil stepmother and two sisters who just had really low self-esteem and just hated her. And the way that they wrote about, the way that this woman had to work several jobs and why these intricate issues with the sisters were present were very specific to the Black experience in the way that they wrote The Wiz, and The Wiz to me also was a love letter to Black people about specific themes. You have, Dorothy, who was in, for lack of a better word, trying to figure out who she was. You look at the beginning of the film, she has a sister who's there with her husband, and they have a brand new baby. She got a younger sister who looks like she's there from college. She's there with her man, and her grandmother's trying to hook her up with somebody. All she wants to do is find out what she's made of. And I would liken Melindy to another one of these stories that's about somebody finding out what they're made of. It was definitely his own adaptation, nothing like the Disney.
It was interesting. So we get, what's the word I'm looking for? Fantasy movies that represent us, right? So Coming to America, Black Panther, and you being a daughter of Ghana, I always want to know why they don't give us our real stories and talk about our real greatness. When you see movies like Coming to America, Black Panther, with the fantasy versions of us versus the actual people who were in those positions actually and historically, how does that make you feel, and what do you think about that?
Well, we are magical. I mean, even our real life stories are pretty magical. 3 of the very first pharaohs of Egypt were all Black women who were Kemetan. I mean, that's an incredible story. One of them was, in fact, a Kandake warrior. Like, when we think about these things, our stories are really amazing. And I say that because I'm segueing. I'm actually a part of the cast of the very first all Black casted action adventure films that will be shot on all of the female pharaohs that graced Egypt. And one of the producers is Hill Harper. The other one is Rhonda Ross, daughter of Diana Ross. And the script was written by an incredible Black artist named Kamiko Tarnez. And first we're doing an animated series on it, as well as a comic novel. And then they're releasing the movie in 3 parts.
Did we just get an exclusive?
Pardon me?
Did we just get an exclusive?
I mean, in a way, now we've been talking about it, but COVID derailed, some of our filming. and which is why now they're doing the comic and the animation novel. So I'm actually doing voiceovers for that this week. So the stories are coming, and not just our own. The stories are coming, and not just our own. I hear about people everywhere writing amazing stories. And so what, if fantasy is the springboard, I mean, there's a such thing as white people have been writing about fantasy forever. We can be in magical spaces and we can be in real spaces. What I really would like to see less of are these stories about our past, about our ancestors, our grands and our great grands. I would love to see them from a more victorious space, because they had those stories. We can talk about some really amazing stories on
I almost
Black
fell
Wall
out my
Street.
chair when you said that. That's so true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm
it's like
Black
either
tragedy.
slavery, or we getting shot and killed or murdered by the cops or something like that. You know what I mean?
You're never gonna see film of a white woman shot in the face, or a black or a white man shot at close range. They're not even gonna do that on television. You're not gonna see a black man do that to a white man on television, or a white woman. But how many times do we see blatant, horrible acts of violence simulated over and over again, either in real life or on film, that have to do with us?
And they win awards for it.
And they went away while racists get a hard on watching us in cinema. Like, maybe I'm probably gonna get in trouble for this, but one of my favorite movies was Django.
I don't hear you not.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite movies was Django, because I was like, well, finally, look at all this random ass violence. He's just, bye-bye, Miss Millie. I'm just saying, you would have never seen anything like that before. And we ain't seen Quentin make a movie since that's gotten any real visibility. And now we see what happens when they do, or even though I'm not a big fan of the writer of this, Birth of a Nation was a very significant film. It showed Black victory at a time when we've been told, I hate it when I hear people say, I'm not like my ancestors. There are plenty of stories about our ancestors who fought back and won, who took over plantations. We don't even know if maybe some Africans might have got on a boat and came back looking for people whom they loved. We have no idea, because the landscape is written by the people who feel as if they won, and have been making sure that those stories don't get to people. We keep hearing all these, like if you Google, Black history now, they're starting to have these really amazing stories that are starting to surface. I kind of like go down a rabbit hole sometimes and just start looking at these videos of newer discoveries of really amazing, courageous Black stories from, 100 years ago or 400 years ago. We're talking about, slave revolts where folks not only got away, but got on a boat and went home. So I forgot my point, but what I'm saying is I just want to see us from a space where we're not dealing with so much Black tragedy. We've seen enough slave films.
Yeah. You brought up a great point, and I want to get into this since you have, unfortunately, in this country. So are you familiar with the Jewish birthright?
No, please hit me.
So in the Jewish community here, I can't remember, I think it's up to a certain age, but you basically have your trip back to Israel funded from the moment you're born.
Wow.
Right? That's called the birthright. And going back to Marcus Garvey, where he believed all Black people should go back to Africa, all the way up to now, I'm hearing Akon even say y'all need to go back to Africa, right? When you saw Black Panther, you had first cousins who grew up in two completely different worlds. One of them full of love, one of them full of hatred because of the experiences. When you see that and you relate that to real life, and growing up, we got no history about Africa. Like everything that I pretty much learned, I had to learn on my own. And because I also have African friends, I was able to get some of it firsthand. How do we bridge that gap and sort of reconnect? Because it's going to be like, I can look at YahZarah, I can look at Willie, I couldn't tell if he was from Cleveland or if he was from Accra, right? I can't look at you and tell it's a cultural thing, but how do we bridge that gap and reconnect us back with African culture, with the homeland from whence we came, in order to re-establish our identity?
I think that's a personal journey for each and every person. I can't tell one person how they reclaim their identity. What I can say is, just like somebody gets on a plane and goes to Paris to expand themselves, you should get on a plane and visit Ghana or visit South Africa, or spend your summer in the Ivory Coast instead of going to that Daytona Beach or Miami. and have your own experience. When I went to Johannesburg for the first time, I was with Erykah Badu and I was singing background with her. And I kind of got a chance to kind of glance in it. It was a different South Africa then. It was now nearly 20 years ago. But 3 years ago, I went back and I had a chance to really spend some time there. I ended up actually renting a penthouse there for some time and going back and forth because I'm considering making South Africa another home of myself and my families. And I say that because, you know, the Back to Africa, the Visit Africa movement is only a part of the next frontier, which is to consider Africa a new space for us to come and to assist and be a part of. There are places in Johannesburg that will remind you of Miami, remind you of California, remind you of Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Folks have amazing architecture and are starting businesses and happy to see Black folk. And one of the things I loved about Johannesburg, and I'm speaking about that specifically because of their experiences with apartheid, they understand fully the Black experience along with what aligns them with Africa specifically. But they're very excited about being in concert with us and having us in those spaces. There's still some Africans who believe that they haven't quite connected to the Black experience. Do you understand what I'm saying? Colonization has done a number on some spaces in Africa where, you know, I've had conversations with people who are my own relatives who say, I don't know what the real problem is with Black Americans. You know, they should get over it. You know, we were colonized and we did just fine. The level of colonization with which we experienced the stealing away from home, the stripping of actual culture, the not knowing where you are, the definition of humanity defined by your color is something they're never going to really understand. They're never really going to understand. So if you're going over there romanticizing that you're going to make some huge connection with specific spots of Africa because of your shared oppression, you're not going to do that. You should go there to discover what it is you can create and you can share in with your present relevant story of now. Now, there are other spaces where you can go, like I said, South Africa, the Ivory Coast, where there's some spots where people really understand that. But I just feel sometimes like we romanticize, I'm going to go to Africa and they're going to totally understand us. You're going there to reconnect with yourself because you need to reconnect with yourself. That's something you can do right here on American soil.
So I know you want to get into more of her story, Willie, but I just got to feed off of something she said real quick. When did you go to Africa for the first time and what was your experience?
Mm-hmm. So I've been a number of times now. My first experience was 20 years ago with Erykah, but I was there for work. So I had the colonizer's experience because my dollar allowed me to colonize my experience. I was at the top of the food chain because my dollar stretched. I wasn't having a true African experience. And I want to be super clear about that. When the money runs out is when you really discover how people are really living and what they're really experiencing. And a lot of times, I know you want me to answer in one question, but I want to say this. A lot of times we go over there, not for what we can give back to the African, but for how far this dollar can stretch and how much fun we can have. And that's where a lot of the new, I'm going to Africa, I'm going to the year of return is coming from. Oh, I was over and I went to the Shea Butter resorts and but did you go visit did you go visit one of these dirt heaps that people are living in? Did you go visit a school? Did you
go to the village? Right.
Did you go to a village? Did you go to a local church and sing or contribute to a local school or send some kids to school? $1,000 to the life of a child can pay for their schooling for 3 years. You know, depending on where they are. Like, what are we contributing when we think about going back to Africa? But also in that space, what does it offer us that when we get there, we can expand on so that people can take the opportunity to consider another place home besides America? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, you did. And you also gave a great answer because that's the answer that's never usually given. Mm-hmm. You know, I know Africans from East Africa to West Africa to South Africa. Mm-hmm. And I think the unfortunate part, again, if you're Chinese, doesn't matter if you're in China or America, you're Chinese, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm Irish, I can be in Ireland or America, I'm still Irish. Unfortunately, when you're African, if you were born here, you're looked at differently, not just by the people here, but also by people over in Africa. And I think that the thing is, we've never had a conversation, right? So I got a buddy, and we actually had a lady on. She's a Black history professor at CSU here, and we talked about that. When they come here, whoever brings them here literally tells them, don't talk to Black Americans.
Yes.
Right.
The first thing.
Yeah, that's one of the
and that
first
we're
things.
lazy and that we're going to drag them down.
Yeah.
He said the exact same thing. And you said something too, because you just said you can find yourself and become one with your culture here. And I hear a lot of people say, I want to go to Africa or South Africa so I can be with my people, so I can find myself, so I can find out about my
You
heritage.
about to be sadly mistaken when you get off that plane and everybody has a lace front. I'm just putting it out there. Like, one thing I will say is that when I got off the plane in Ghana and I looked around at the billboards with people that were Black like me, it was amazing. But also you're going to see, brown elbows and brown knuckles and brown knees from people who are bleaching because they want to assimilate a specific element of white culture or have light skin privilege.
That's exactly what I wanted to get into, because a lot of them are bleaching their skin because they don't feel like they're good enough also, because they're trying to fit into white society, which is something we talked about earlier.
Yeah, or not even that. They wanted a whole other type of privilege within their own social group where they don't want to feel invisible. Like we actually brought, that's actually a gift of ours. We brought over there. We
like,
brought
imagine
that over there.
Wow, I didn't think about that.
Think about it. Like Nigeria and the Nollywood market, they have for a long time, they had a whole string of videos where they had this girl that they call Beyonce, because that became the new standard of Black beauty in Nigeria for a moment. And people taking pills to bleach their unborn children to make sure that they have, like, these are things that folks have tried to do and nearly killed themselves, putting Clorox and saran wrap around their arms in order to try to bleach their skin. And this is in Africa, where this shouldn't even be an issue. But on the other side of that, when I got off the plane in Ghana, I looked up and I saw myself. And that is incredible, to be someplace where the intensity of colorism isn't necessarily felt, and where everybody there looks like you. So that's not the biggest issue you have to deal with. Blackness doesn't, the definition of Blackness is not a conversation. Africans don't even call themselves Black until they come over here.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to get into that, about the fact that even if you go to England, even if you go all over Africa, the Caribbean, nobody calls themselves Black. We don't call ourselves American, right? Simply because we're not proud of the country because of all that's happened. And I wanted to get your take on that, like African and American, but you have to be considered Black. Is that, in a way, we say we're Black and proud, but at the same time, it's also, in a way, we feel some type of shame.
We shouldn't. Everybody wants to be us. You go to Japan, they're singing gospel music, they're doing hip hop. You go to Africa, they open up stores where they call themselves niggas. The world is trying to catch up with the vibration of the Black American. So I can answer that question really quickly. There are some of us who feel shame, but we should look around at every place in the world we can see our reflection. Now, people will want to pretend because they love Black culture, but hate Black struggle. But ultimately, we are the Rosetta Stone of culture. The Black American, which has dealt with all of the worst that could happen to it, still being a child of Africa and America and all the other things that the world has mixed us up to be. And still, Black rises to the top to define everything from Latin America to Asian culture. So, I don't walk with any shame, even though people who are African like me have occasionally been like, sucks to be you don't speak tree. Like, you want to sing gospel. Do you know how to run? Y'all weren't born with that gift. You had to listen to Kim Burrell to get that. She's from Texas.
Yo, that was cold. I got to repeat that. She literally just said we are the Rosetta Stone of culture.
She just gave us a whole clip. That's the clip right there.
I believe that in my heart. It's like when Nina Simone said, I believe that Black people are the most beautiful people in the world, but they don't even know it. Drops mic.
Wow. Mic drop.
That's it. She said it. Black people. She didn't say African people. She didn't say Latin people. She didn't say, she's talking about for her, us. And this is a understanding. A rhema is a Greek word for true understanding. This needs to be rhema to us, that there is nothing to be ashamed of, that Africans loved us and that they missed us, and that energy still traveled to us, and that because of that part of us, we became something even bigger. I'm not happy that my family members were forced into this country, but I'm so glad that because of our African blood, we were able to turn the worst thing that ever happened to us in something that the whole world wanted to be. That's Black people. We did that shit. Nobody else.
And it's first off, I'm gonna give you a hand because listen, but it's funny you brought up something earlier. You said other cultures want to be us. Alex, I don't know if you've seen it, but I watched a TikTok video earlier. It was a lady sitting in a chair, Black lady. Mm-hmm. So they began to peel off. It was fake. It wasn't a Black lady. They began to peel off the skin. It was a white woman. She dressed herself up like a whole Black lady. I'm talking about from her legs to everything. Like, and everybody was like shocked, like, why would you do that? And you just broke it down like they want to be us.
Blackfishing is to me symptomatic of people who want to get back to that original vibration, because science even dictates that the very first DNA of the world was found in Africa. And I've been to Alexandria, so I know what those people look like, and they're Black and beautiful, and they're us, and they're the start. And from that, the whole world came. And so a lot of what even I think perceived feigned white supremacy is about is their real feelings of inferiority, because they really want to get back to the vibration that they came from. They can't understand why they did the worst to us and we keep rising. And then they realize it's that, it's the fucking vibration that I'm no longer a part of. And I hate these people for having it. And then they have nerve to be benevolent and loving and want to see everybody do well. Here it is, you have these poor Asian women shot in a nail salon, and the people leading the rallying cry for hold up. We know what it's like to be marginalized. The new conversation needs to be what's going on with white terrorism is us. Us first. We have always been the people who step up and say, this isn't right. We've always been the race that welcomes everybody. We've always been the people who have been the race of healing.
Yeah, no, I was telling Willie this story. I went to the gym, and this white girl with the fakest ass that you can ever imagine, trying to get her body to look like a Black woman. And I said, I wonder if she won't want our struggle too. Like, cause don't just have half of it. Take it all, right? Yeah. Take it all. Because if you really want, like, they want to move like us, they want our swagger, they want to talk like us, they want to walk like us, they want to dance like us, they wish they could sing like us, and everything that
they can do all those things now. They're doing them. They're doing them. And I don't care that they're doing them. I just want them to remember where they came from. Where's our royalty? That royalty for you getting all this amazing stuff from the Rosetta Stone of culture, which is us, is simply being an ally, living in it. You want that big fake ass? I'm here for it. Just when you see Black women being marginalized and mistreated with those same natural Black asses and lips and colors, I just want you to step up and say, that's not right. I want you to say to your racist white uncle, hey, I want you to step up as a person who is a purveyor of culture and also be an advocate of the people with whom you are borrowing and also appropriating from. That's it. I'm cool. I'm not angry as long as you know how to be humble and helpful.
Man.
It's asking for a lot, but okay.
I used to think so, but I've also met some people who have really like put their lives on the line along with me, Latin, Black, you name it. And it's an everyday struggle for myself to deal with my own prejudices. And I'm one of those people who still says, Black people can't really be racist when all decks are stacked against us in this country, where I can have a gun in my face, in my mouth, in front of my mom tomorrow for nothing. Where I could see a Black man, die on national television for nothing. But at the same time, isn't a symptom of the change we desire having people who want to assist? And those people are existing. Most of them are millennial. You know, I'm 42 years old. I don't lie about my age. I'll be 43 this year. I see a marked difference in the generation 20 years behind me. I've watched these kids on television turn in their racist family members or read them on screen for white privilege. And we want that, right? I feel like we want that. And in order to continue to have that, we have to allow ourselves to be in space with these people and even to transform how we feel about them. Now, that doesn't mean, oh, one day this is going to be a soundbite, but fuck it. That doesn't mean that that's transformed my relationship with trust with white people. That's going to be a minute. That is just what it is. And in relationships I have with people who are not Black folk, who are white folks, I've been honest about that. God's still dealing with me. Help me to deal with that by being the advocate you say you are. When you see horrible things happening, that helps my trust. And I do feel like Black people are worthy of being able to say, hey, y'all gonna have to earn my trust. Just like you said, I don't believe it. I can't believe that's possible, but it is. Many of the things that we see would not have had a spotlight thrust on it if it hadn't been for indignant, angry people of other races who helped push a specific conversation about Blackness forward along with us.
Wow.
We got to make space for them. We do.
Wow. YahZarah is taking us on a journey. And
I mean, shit, I'm dealing with it on my own. I swear to God. Like,
no, we love it. We love it.
That's what we asked for. Take us on a journey. Absolutely.
Because I mean, on the path of being a better person, like being a good person, beyond being a Black woman, beyond being anything, and I wake up Black every day. That'll never go away. I'm always going to be an African, those things. But on the path of being a person who was born to love, how can I say I am that and still hold on to some of this tragic energy towards white people?
You said a mouthful right there, Willie.
I'm still working on it. Like, don't think it's done. But I'm not here to lie and say it doesn't exist, but I'm also here to say that if we can cure it for us all, not just us, but them, if we can work on killing that, then we can get to the real conversation, which is about economics, which is about class, which is about making sure that all of our children can go to college, that everybody can buy a home, because right now there is a segment of society in this country that benefits from the fact that all we're thinking about is race. Some of us will never know what it's like to own a house, and it won't matter what color we are.
Whew, man. So let's get back to the journey. Speaking of journey, life after high school. What was your next chapter? What was your next journey after high school? Break that down.
Well, you know, part of what happened next happened because I went to Duke Ellington. While I was there, I ended up coming in contact with these two gentlemen who went to Howard University. One of them would end up singing background for Erykah Badu, put a finger in that. I also ended up being in a band with some fellow students of the school. And we started to tour DC. So I'm performing at places like Tacoma Station and the Warner Theater, and we are absolutely underage. So we had to perform under a secret name to perform in clubs.
I was about to ask, at what age?
Yeah, I was 15 years old. And so, sorry about that. Let me put on Do Not Disturb so we can have that happen again. Okay, all right, I'm back. Sorry about that. We even performed on the Apollo. Unfortunately, that night I couldn't go because I was in a secret meeting with Andre Harrell, who had come to hear the group that I was in called In Time. And this band that I was in, however, we all auditioned to go to North Carolina Central University. And the whole band received full scholarships to this school. And I got accepted to Howard and some other schools. But when I saw my whole band got accepted to Central, I was like, I don't want to study classical music anymore. I'll be 50 years old when I'm recognized, you know, especially at that time. I decided to go to North Carolina Central University, and that's when my whole life changed. I got the call to sing with Erykah, and while I was also there, I was in a music industry class with Fonte Coleman, Pooh Bear Jones, and Pat Douthat, who would later be Ninth Wonder. and Darian Brockington, who is probably one of this world's greatest R&B balladeers, who was my choir brother at North Carolina Central University. And I was part of the focus group for Who is Jill Scott. So we would listen to these records and then tell them what we liked. And so the professor who was there, Chip, had actually submitted a record that was turned down by Steve McKeever and them, and he was pissed. He made it his life's work to create a record that he felt would be better than Jill Scott's Who is Jill Scott. And he was going all over Durham trying to find somebody to record this record for him. I kept telling him I could sing. He kept ignoring me and would not listen to me sing. I started singing background for Erica. He started to pay a little bit more attention to me. And so one day, Darian Brockington had me come into class and bring this demo I had recorded. And he heard me sing and he heard my pen. And he tore my record to pieces. He tore my record to pieces so badly, I cried in front of my class. I couldn't believe this was happening to me. As a woman in my 40s now, I know sometimes people will rip you down so that they can actually have an opportunity to capitalize on you. Because they think that instead of coming from a place where they're like, oh, you're amazing, their personal story that says you're going to reject them, if they just simply tell you you're great, makes them just decide to crap on it so that they can then come and rescue you from yourself. Put a finger in that. It'll come to you in the morning. But at any rate, I ended up going into the studio with this gentleman because he was my professor. And he also was the brother who was responsible for the bass line in Sugar Hill's boom, 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 that was my professor. And he was brilliant. And so he created this basic writer's camp of artists around myself, which was Fonte, which was Dee, which was Pat. And we would bounce music off of each other. We would just bounce music off of each other. Fonte introduced me to Parliament again and Bootsy, and we would go to record stores where we could play the records. Remember, you could go to a record store and you might be able to ask for the record and be able to play it, or, you know, sit with earphones, and we would listen to all these records all day. So he would introduce me to, you know, funk, and I would introduce him to Miles Davis and Kim Burrell, and he would introduce me to Radiohead. And so we would do these exchanges, and all of us would come together and we would rate people's records. Fonte would make people cry. He and Ninth Wonder would make people cry sometimes with their critical ear, but they were always right. And so I ended up being a hook singer for the first incarnation of Little Brother, which was a group called Gimme. But I was the one that was in and out of the studio and always on tour. So I would kind of just float in and out, but we were all encouraging each other's purpose. So long story short, I put out my record, Hear Me. I'm on tour with Erykah at the time. I'm going to school while touring with Erykah Badu. And let me rewind. When I auditioned for Erykah, I auditioned on a Sunday. My mother and I had cleaned out our accounts for me to come to Dallas, Texas, because she was looking for somebody from Dallas. I did not say that I wasn't from Dallas. I just didn't say I wasn't from Dallas. I auditioned on a Sunday and was on the road on a Wednesday. I learned 17 songs. And then I was out there on the road with her for 7 years. I had a chance to arrange our mama's gun. I was arranging our mama's.
Stop right there. 17 songs in 2 days?
17 songs, 2 days. Now, it didn't hurt that I was already a fan, you know, so I came with a leg up. But I bodied it, and she kept me. And what was very telling about the timing and how new it was for everybody is when I auditioned for her, I sang Gap Band, You Are My High, and she knew the song, so she sung background for me while I auditioned for her. And of course, I nearly dropped dead on the song.
I was about to say, you can't just gloss over that and not tell us how you were in that moment. Like,
oh, I nearly dropped dead.
All of a sudden, Erykah starts singing background. Like, did you stop or did you just, whoa, wait a minute now? Like, how was you like?
I think in my head, I was like, like, bitch, do you see what she's doing? Do you realize that Erykah Badu is singing background for you right now? You know, I think I wanted so much to impress her, to show her that I wanted to be present to serve her, that I wanted her to see what I had to give. And I was in the room with Amir Questlove, which is just like being in the room with Fonte. So I also knew I couldn't mess up because I'd be the project. I would be the butt of a joke the very next day, and which was crazy. Like Amir Questlove was playing drums on this tour. I used to cornrow his hair. I did not even know who the Roots were, and I was out there with Amir every day.
Wow,
it was crazy. And he used to let me watch his Soul Train tapes. You know, I'd watch Soul Train with him while I was cornrowing his hair on the bus. And long story short, I put out Hear Me. I put it out in April. In fact, next month will be the 21-year anniversary of my very first record.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually going to drop it as an NFT. So that's a whole other conversation. Yeah. That's the whole new hustle. Like, you know, money my great grandchildren can eat off of. My great grandchildren will be on your
generational wealth.
Yes, exactly. Generational wealth that we can keep passing. And so I ended up opening up for her in Greensboro, and I decided I needed somebody to kick a verse on it. And Talib Kweli was traveling with us at the time, and he heard me playing the song on the bus and was like, I'll do it for you. And so sometimes I look back on my career and I'm like, did these things really happen? And you weren't. I think sometimes you're so in the moment of something that's happening that you want to make sure that you're doing it so well that you don't even give yourself time to celebrate what the heck just happened to you.
You talked about magical earlier when we were talking about the other culture. Like you had a magical life, this is like something we write in the movie. Like, but you lived it.
I lived it, and I'm living it. The whole story is that, you know, later on when I would end up with Lenny Kravitz, I was selling real estate. I just divorced. I had a brand new baby who was like nearly at this time about 2.5, about to turn 3, maybe not brand new at the time, but I was selling real estate, not even working in music just to provide for him. I had to give it up for a while, moved to New York. I wasn't even making music. And my old publicist calls me one day and is like, hey, Lenny Kravitz's people have been searching for you for 6 months.
Hold on, wait,
and they need to come out there.
I don't want to cut you off because I want to get in. We want to get into.
I don't want to cut you off, but
I'm sorry, because I want to get down there.
Okay. Did I fast forward too far?
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you when you were touring with Erykah, like what did you learn by touring with her, being so young? Like, explain the influence and impact she had over your career and over your life, being with her that young.
So, she was always home folk. I remember I wanted to quit school. No, actually not quit school. This is when I was still trying to finish at the time. And I lost my funding for the dorm that year. And so I did everything I could to raise this money so I could go back to school. And I was singing background for her at the time. And so finally, you know, I said, well, who do I know who can help me with this? I've never asked a boss for money in my life, but I called Erykah because she created such an environment that in a way I understood she would possibly pay it forward for me because she saw me like a little sister. And that I always worked to show her that I knew I was in the presence of a master, hard all the time. And so I reluctantly said, Erykah, can I get an advance on $3,000 so I can stay in the dorm because I really would like to finish my degree. And she wanted me to finish my degree. She was like, well, you can leave or you can stay. But she said, do you have a rich uncle maybe you can call? She didn't just give it to me because she's wise. I'm sure everybody was asking her for money. But I said, I don't. And they're going to kick me up out of here if I don't get this money. And I would like to graduate. And she talked to the comptroller, and the next day there was an apple tree touring check in the hand of the comptroller who told me maybe you just need to go home. I'll never forget that. That's Erykah Badu. Erykah Badu. Yeah, I mean, Erykah Badu listened to me, and she also listened to ratchet trap music. And, you know, Erykah listened to everything from Mtume to ratchet trap. And what I've loved is watching her evolve into feeling freer to be her best and most authentic and open self out in the open, not caring what anybody else says. She was always that person. But even as I watch her now, I see even a newer freedom for her. And she's always been about living in that. And that's what I learned. Live in your own personal freedom. Don't look behind you in the rearview mirror or behind you at the audience to see what anybody else is thinking while you're living your life, the life you deserve to live.
What's your favorite Erykah song?
That's a hard question to answer. I would say my favorite record. No, okay. I mean, my favorite record is always going to be Mama's Gun, but I'm gonna answer your question. But it's still hard. It's like asking me my favorite Prince song. I can't answer that. But
I got you.
But I will say that the song that no matter how many times I hear it, it's like the first time I heard it and I cry fat tears is Time's a Wasting. Time's a wasting. Don't you waste your time, young man. It's this love letter she wrote to her son about growing up. You know, run, baby, run. Where you running to, where you running to. Just, and then that part where she says, you know, these things are going to happen. But at the end of it, she says, still, no matter what happens to you, smile. And then when she gets to that portion where it goes, oh, baby, we need to smile. And she says it over and over again. It's almost like an affirmation or a chant. And there have been times when I needed to listen to that over and over again to be reminded that regardless of what slings and arrows I was handling, that I just needed to keep smiling. I just needed to keep channeling my energy in the direction of happiness.
I remember watching the verses with her and Chill. And that was magical. I was like, I was still high from watching Face and Teddy Riley. Like that night was magical. Like you're talking about sparks flying. I was at home, like I think I had a couple bottles that night, but we'll get to that.
Well, you know, that first one though was magic for me.
The first one where they couldn't connect. Which one are you talking about?
That's the one. I'm sorry, you know, that was black. That was great Black history at its best because we have to be able to laugh at ourselves.
True.
You look like, is Teddy Riley your cousin? Because I don't want to laugh at him. Get mad.
Me or Willie? Which one are you talking about?
Whose family is he? Because your face was like, man, she's talking about Teddy.
No, he's not my cousin, but so Teddy.
I love New Jack Swing. Don't get me wrong.
Oh my God. But watching those two love on each other as Black men, and then watching Jill Scott and Erykah love on each other as Black women, because I've never had a chance to hear that. Like they literally just had a whole segment where they were just talking about how much they love each other and admire each other and how they respect each other's work. And you know, it's funny because that era of music, which I mean is a lot different from this era of music, which I'm definitely gonna ask you about that too. But I mean, just the level of talent and creativity and originality, Jill Scott being a giant, Erykah being a giant, and seeing those two come together, and that moment was just special. I was just like, man, this is amazing. And so my story, I don't know Erykah, but I grew up with a guy. So I grew up as a musician. What
do you play?
Play drums.
Oh, dope. Okay.
Yeah, so I grew up in church playing drums, and it was this kid. We basically grew up together, saw each other all the time, blah, blah, blah. His mother was on keys, his father was on bass. And but I never knew he was a singer. And so I remember going out to a club one night and he was there and he was singing and he sung Prince. And I was just like, dude, I never knew you could sing. And it was Duran. I was like, man, I never knew you could sing. He was like, yeah, I can sing. It just blew my, and you know how great of a vocalist that kid is. I was just
that's my baby. Yeah.
So going back to touring with Erykah, and I want to dig back into the story that you told where you had to get a job as a realtor, which was in a sense stepping away from your art, which I know would have had to have been difficult because you've been doing it your whole life. Just you were a brand new mom. What was that experience like for you? Kind of walk us through that.
Well, you know, first, my partner at the time, who was somebody who came to one of my shows 2 months after I married my ex-husband, he told his friend, I think this, he saw me on BET and he said, I think that woman's my wife. Long story short, I was sleeping on his best friend's girlfriend's couch. And we ended up going to dinner, and we're going to lunch, where I spoke with my hands and told him I was married, and then we never saw each other again. Fast forward to after I'm separated from my ex-husband, I discover I'm pregnant, and I meet this brother for breakfast. And I had planned to say to him that I had felt mutually for him for many years. And so we meet, and instead I'm meeting to tell him, hey, I felt mutually for you for years, but I'm getting a divorce, but I'm also pregnant. And he says to me, well, I'm not afraid of your child, and you should come to Brooklyn. Well, I didn't come to Brooklyn. Later on, I saw him and he was with somebody else, and I was heartbroken, and I reached out to him, and we ended up meeting again, as he said he felt the same. And long story short, we ended up together. We've been together since my son was 6 months old. But one of the first things that when we decided to be in relationship with one another, he said, you know, I came from a household where I was raised by an incredible Black woman, and I never want to see another incredible Black woman on their head again. So he works in real estate. I want you to go to real estate school, and I'm going to pay for this for you. So that no matter what happens, whether you're with me or someone else, no human being, no man, no woman will ever leave you on your head again. I think it's so important to have the people in your life who see what you are, don't want to diminish you, and who want to hand you tools. So real estate became my tool for reclaiming my life. And that took courage, because I hadn't done anything that wasn't music before. But because somebody saw me and saw what I needed, and then decided to invest in me, which has really been like the story of my life with Erica, with others, with my partner, who didn't want to see me diminished ever, put me in this position. And so I'm selling real estate for the top real estate company in the country, Corcoran. I'm selling houses, I'm helping people find apartments, and I was miserable. I was miserable. I had money, but I was barely seeing my child. I was not making any music. And my ex-husband called me one day and he said, look, I didn't support you in our marriage, but why don't you let me support you now? Let me have our son. Let him come home with me to North Carolina. And I'll teach him things that only a father can teach him. And you can get back to doing what you were born to do. And then when you're ready, I'll bring him home. You can bring him home. I was devastated, but I knew it was the right thing to do. And I knew that because so often I see some of my sisters making their sons man of the house, responsible for them. And I saw my 2.5-year-old son feeling responsible for carrying the groceries up a 4-story walk up. And, you know, none of the money I was making, even though we lived in an amazing apartment building, or we had these things, was keeping him in a space where he could continue to have his childhood, because it was never enough. And so I allowed him to go home to his father, which was really hard for me. But I said, let me keep my baby to the end of his preschool year. And so a few weeks after that, I got a call from my old publicist, who told me that Lenny Kravitz had been searching for me for 6 weeks. And sometimes we have to let go of something that's in our hand, so that something else that you're supposed to have can land in it. And I didn't lose anything by allowing the father of my child to be a primary raiser of in this boy's life, to allow myself to shed my ego, to release my connections to what I thought other people thought I should be doing as a mother. And I am and was then a great mother. But my son also has an incredible father. That doesn't happen for everybody. I didn't meet my father till I was 14 years old. And so I let him go with his dad. And it was the very best decision that I made, because it was the catalyst for me returning to music. The next song that I made, while my baby boy was still there with me, was Running with Raymond Angry, which was one of the very first songs written for the ceremony. That would never have happened had I not trusted that I was covered and divinely guided and that things were working out for me.
I heard you tell a part of that story last night when you said Lenny was searching for you for 6 weeks, which I think is an amazing story. I'm a huge Lenny Kravitz fan as an artist, as an actor. I want you to dig into that story a little bit, and then of course touring with him, which I know was awesome. And I know he was also very close to Prince, but dig into that story a little bit for our audience, because that's not typical. That's not a usual story. And you having had the success that you already had, but having found yourself in the place in between Erica and whatever other artists you work with. Lenny, right. Yeah. Kind of, can you dig into that story a little bit more, please?
Well, also, before I go there, it's not lost that in 2010, I released the Ballad of Purple St. James, which was considered for a Grammy in 6 categories. I hadn't become a slouch on my own between working with Erica and working with Lenny. It's just that I walked away from myself. And so I want to make sure I put that out there, because there's something to be said about forgetting who you are. And for a moment I did. I just, I had this baby and I was dealing with these issues of mourning and trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do and what the most responsible moment was when I ended up with Lenny. So it was very important to me to be out there, because I always had a great deal of love and respect for his mother, Roxy Roker. And so it was really incredible to be in space with him. And then also, it was also a full circle moment, because on my cover, my record Black Star, I'm actually wearing his pants. in one of the photos, I am wearing Lenny Kravitz's pants, which I later found out. I've never told him I was wearing his pants, but I was wearing his pants. And not only in that cover, but also the cover the pair of purple pants he's wearing on the cover of the Carnival record, I am also wearing inside of that. Like, I guess the guy let me use them before he sent them to Lenny. And it's just so funny how the world just spins around. And when I signed to the record label 3 Keys to put out Black Star, they were like, we think you want to be the next female Lenny Kravitz. I think that's what you really want to do. And I was like, yeah, but they never let me make that record. That's a whole other story, ever. They wanted me to do what everybody else is doing, and it got me what everybody else got. So fast forward, I auditioned for Lenny, and it was a cardinal rock and roll moment. I'm at the wife of Boris Becker's house, and he comes out shirtless with nothing but a pair of black leather pants on, and the wind is blowing, and he's standing there, and we auditioned for him, and it was just very fluid. He's definitely the product of good Caribbean upbringing, and you can tell because when you're with him, you're basically in the presence of just a good brother. You can tell somebody gave him some good brought-up-see. And I ended up being out there, and it ended up affirming everything that I had tried to let go of about myself that was good. I was able to find myself again in the fashion and in the music and in the places where we got to go around the world and to share that energy. And also, what a lot of people don't know about Lenny is that, he's also a minister of music. When you listen to the songs that he sings, they come from an inspirational space. And when he's performing, it's nothing for that man to get off stage and walk around with 10,000 people touching him like he's Jesus of Nazareth, because he wants to give back the energy of love so badly that he's willing to walk around a bunch of strangers just to exchange the energy. He wasn't just an influence as much as he was a confirmation of myself and what I wanted to give to the world as a musician. And so it was really wonderful to work with him. And then one of the other singers, she's the one that had the bright idea that we needed to dance as hard as we did. She was like, how are we going to stand out? This guy has had 3 sets of background singers. What's going to make it stick? And she's like, we need to dance. We need to study the Ikettes. We need to dance for blood and sing for fire every time we get up there with him. And we did. And I think the turning point for me one day is when the stylist came in and said, I see you. You know, I see that you're going to be going somewhere. He said, Lenny walked into our session yesterday, and he says, I want everybody to look like YahZarah does on stage. I want them to look like they're African gods, like she looks.
Damn.
On stage.
Okay.
And it resonated so tightly for me because I used to get the shit beat out of me for it in DC. You know, it wasn't just how I looked, it was how I carried myself. And he saw that, and he wanted other people, including himself, to look like that so they could feel like it too. And that was so affirming, because you can be in spaces with people where you are singing with them and they don't want to see you do that. They don't want to see you be that, to become your inner spirit, to be yourself, and to continue to encourage that. And every time he had an opportunity to, he put me out front. You know, his live documentary, Just Let Go, you know, they interviewed me. I got amazing camera time. I know that wasn't by chance. He was generous with his space. He let me sing with him on stage more than once. I always wanted to do that with Lenny Kravitz. And to do that, to be in Paris on stage performing and have that immortalized on film, all these things I really desperately needed because of all the stuff I had given away prior to being back in that space. I had forgotten that shit was even inside of me. You know, and if I had held on to my ego and been like, you can't take the boy home, and I've got to stay here, and I've got to be in this spot, I have to do what I know instead of stepping into what I don't know, I wouldn't be here talking about the ceremony with you. You know, and he's the one that later called me up and said, hey, Madonna just asked me for your number. You know, can I give it to her? You know, I ended up on the road with him for 4 years, making amazing friendships, and I count him as one of them. And I don't take that lightly, because that doesn't happen all the time.
So, you know, I gotta ask, what's your favorite Lenny Kravitz song? That's
not fair either.
I know.
I'll say the one that was the first that I felt, oh man, there's so many. And we bonded over Prince, which is the whole other conversation. So please don't let me forget to talk about that, because something really special happened as a result of that. My favorite Lenny Kravitz song to perform.
Go ahead, you tell me yours and I'll tell you mine.
It would be Dancing Till Dawn. I loved doing it because it was so electric, and he would let us sing at the very top of our registers with our chests wide open. That was one of my favorites to sing on stage with him. Also, there was some records from the Strut record that I feel like people slept on Strut, and I don't understand why, that were amazing that we would do live. But lastly, it never got old to do Let Love Rule. It never got old. There was an energy that coursed through people when he sung that song that was very, very special for me. And then the first song that made me fall in love with him, with his music, was It Ain't Over Till It's Over. I played it on repeat when I broke up with my ex-boyfriend in the 7th grade. It got me through a major breakup at the age of 13.
So those are classics. My favorite one, and I've always loved the song, but there used to be a video and I can't find it anymore. It used to be online. It's him and Prince. They were walking through the aisle up on stage to perform American Woman.
Oh, of course, man. I mean, now you talking about live. Oh, come on.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So,
yes.
I mean, I don't know if you feel like it, but I mean, if you want to, you know, give us a little snippet, since you actually did perform the song live.
Oh man, I'm gonna leave that to Lenny. But
all right.
What I will do is tell you an incredible story of what happened after Prince passed. Lenny knows how much I love Prince, and for years I used to do a tribute to Prince while he was alive. And it was always really incredible in telling to me that he never shut me down. I'm talking about live video performances all over the internet of me performing Little Red Corvette and all of his tunes. And then I would look up in the audience after a couple of years, and there would be members of MPG who were coming to the show and telling me that he was aware of my work. So long story short, when I start working with Lenny, we share our passion for Prince. He knows the brother. Oh my God. When Prince passes away, his engineer gives Lenny his guitar, one pair of shoes, and a tambourine that belonged to Prince. And so Lenny comes to New York to take part in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's tribute to Prince. And I come because, of course, I'm like, there's a tribute to Prince. I know this isn't a regular show, but please let me just sing with you because he changed my life. And so right before we get ready to get on stage, he whispers for me to come into his dressing room. And he hands me Prince's tambourine and his guitar and lets me put on Prince's shoes, or try to put on Prince's shoes. My feet were actually bigger than Prince's, which is crazy. And that encapsulates who Lenny is. I always thought that was just one of the most amazing things. And then his resident photographer, Mathieu Baton, who also was good friends with Prince, let me hold one of Prince's rehearsal notebooks, because he was like, this energy is with you and you need to hold this now that he's gone. And, I sometimes look back on my time with Lenny Kravitz and say to myself, that period in time really did saving me, not the right word. That period of time really did affirm for me that I belonged in the spaces I want to be in moving forward, and that I'm in now. It was an affirmation for me that he felt like I was one of them. So much so that he wanted me to feel that energy so that I could use it to prepare myself forward. It was big for me. And a funny story is, I met Prince at Paisley Park during his birthday party, and Erykah Badu was performing. And I was still singing for her at the time. And I went and got a designer to make me very special black for that evening. And so I walk into Prince and he's in the rehearsal hall. And it had been an amazing weekend. I went to Bible study that Prince was having in the main vestibule of Paisley Park. And I was sitting next to Larry Graham and Fred Wesley. Just mind-blowing ass weekend with Prince. And so we've been seeing each other around the compound for some time. So by the time we actually got a chance to interface, there were a lot of warm feelings. We talking and I'm telling him how he changed my life and how amazing he is. And then we go in for a hug. And it turns out that we were the same height and heels, at least that day. And so we go in, and clearly we were both going in for that, put it there, big tight hug. We bump heads. I'm not talking about just like any bump. I'm talking about boom, bump heads with Prince Rogers Nelson in Paisley Park. And I felt a warm, hot tear just trickle down the side of my face as Prince did his patented. He hated me. And because I went to go give him a CD later, and then Dommy went to give him one, and then he says, "Oh, I love records. Here, I'll take it." And so I went to give him my CD, and he was like, "I don't take CDs." Clearly, I had triggered his ass because we clonked heads. But the number of years I was allowed to continue I was allowed to tribute him. I was 21 years old when that happened. Years later, I started doing the tributes, and he never shut me down. And then he also called for me to audition to sing background for him once, but I was pregnant with Miles. So it just meant a lot to be in space with Lenny, which was to me a junior iteration of Prince.
All right. So I've been waiting to ask you this question because getting to know you tonight, you are very, I don't like using the word humble, but you are very level headed. You don't seem like you're high, above. You've worked with Erykah Badu, you've worked with Lenny Kravitz. You even said that Madonna had requested you, and then Prince wanted you. How do you not get a high? How do you manage to keep yourself level-headed? Because even for the young women and men that's coming behind you, explain to them how you can have this type of success at a very young age, but at the same time stay true to who you are.
Maybe it's because of where I started. I started in the church, everybody can sing there. Everybody's got a gift. Everybody is a star. Just going to performing arts school where there were other people who were really, really gifted. And so, I wasn't the only amazing fish in the sea. I mean, nobody can be me but me, but I was around a lot of really excellent people who also, I'm a cup, you know what I mean? It comes through me and then I get to give it to you. It doesn't belong to me. It's a gift that's given to me to share with others. And I think that that's what helps. Now there's a persona that I fall into when it's time to get on stage where, all that goddess energy and bad bitch energy definitely does step up. It's showtime, and I also have come into a space now in my adult self where I can say there is something uniquely special about me and what it is I give to the world. But I can do that, and my humility can still maintain the same space with my divinity. Like I can still be a queen, absolutely know that what I'm giving to the musical space is something beautiful and unique, that my voice is my own, and that I show just as well as I prove just as well as I show, but there's sometimes when things come out of me vocally that I just know for a fact I wasn't responsible for. Sometimes the way my pen moves, I'm looking at it like, wow, did that just happen? Or the number of times that I can say I just walked up to a microphone and freestyled a song that changed how I look at the world and now changes how others look at it. Not too good, I
hope. I want to dig into the ceremony.
Yes.
But right before we do that, I want to piggyback off of what Willie just asked. How do you stay humble when you've been exalted? I have a question on that energy when you go on stage.
Mm-hmm.
How do you come down from that night after night? Because I've performed drums, but I've also done a little acting back in the day. And I noticed that shift in energy, and it's hard to come down. So I can imagine being around Erica, Lenny, Prince, going on stage and coming down from that. How do you actually come down from that type of energy?
There are a number of ways. Let's talk about the first. The first is physically, there's show adrenaline. So, I go get myself a hot meal. I take a shower to bring myself down, but I also meditate. Sometimes I take baths because I like to deal in the spiritual space, and it's all energy. I'll say this: when I used to perform early in my career, and I would do like a stretch of tours, I would always come home sick, and I would never understand why. I would be drained. And then I later had an opportunity to work with a vocal coach who said, well, when you're on stage and you're performing, people are beaming their energy into you. Their love, whatever those songs that you sing are making them feel, their lust for you. Thousands of people, their envy of you being there, but loving you. There's all these convergence of serious emotions that are being beamed into you at the moment that you are opening up your soul to receive the music that comes through you into the world and into them. There's all these different emotional and spiritual transactions taking place, and it can actually make you physically sick afterwards. And so I started taking specific baths, I'll bathe in salt water. I'll, smoke myself out in Palo Santo. And it might be woo-woo to others, but it works for me, because when I sing on stage, there's a part of me that wants to feel every painful moment with my fans. That some of the things that people have said to me that music does. I had a song called Starship, and it never failed the number of people who would say, you wrote that song for me, and they were beaming in their tears and their sorrow and their, what they were excavating into me while I'm singing it for them. They don't know that that's making me ill. You look at people like Summer Walker who are like, I don't like to tour. That's why. They take specific grounding to be up there and to be on stage. That's why you got some of these young people taking Molly and all these other drugs so that they can deal with anxiety. But when it really is, it's energy. It's just energy. You're scared. Turn that into something. Meditate. But instead, they've been invited to take all these other things as these gateways to feeling better. For me, sleep, meditation, going to have a great meal, taking those energetic baths, releasing that energy in a positive manner is what I do to stay afloat.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that, like going from being in front of thousands of people night after night to coming down to just you in a room. Like what type of psychological effect or energetic effect, but you broke it down nice, and thanks for that.
Yeah. I also take 30 minutes to myself before I sing, at least, because after you get off stage, there are going to be people who actually want to meet you and touch you and greet you, and you can't give to people in that way unless you've given to yourself first. That's the metaphor for life, but definitely for the performer.
Wow. The ceremony. This is your third album, fourth album?
No, this is my, let's count here. I think this is my fifth baby, but let's see. Hear Me, Black Star, The Ballad of Purple St. James, and The Ceremony. So this is my fourth. In between that, I have one EP called The Prelude.
Okay.
So 4 babies and half on a baby.
Half on a baby, I like that. So I'm gonna tell you, it gave me Lenny and Prince vibes, this album, but I can definitely tell you it was your specific journey. Haven't been around artists for as long as I have, you can just tell when something's coming from their personal experience versus someone else wrote it for them. So take us on this journey. Where did this start? First song, Legend.
Legend was recorded in its first iteration in 2005. It used to be my theme music, because I'd say every hero needs their theme music. And so my band and I would come out to this, but the very first time that I wrote it with a girlfriend of mine. I didn't write alone, wrote it in 15 minutes. She and I are born a day apart, and we literally finished each other's musical sentences. Her name is Inga Nandi Willis, and she wrote Twisted for Anthony Hamilton on Carlos Santana's album. If you've heard that, you got it all wrong, you got it all twisted. That's her. Anthony Hamilton sung it. And so she moved to Durham and was disillusioned with music just as I was. And we went on a path of writing for other people. And so we were writing for Frenchie Davis, who was on The Voice. And that week, like we wrote like 12 songs in 7 days. It was really, really crazy, like how we were churning out music. But when you're really linked with somebody like that, which is the same type of energy I have with Fonte, we just wrote songs and finished each other's sentences. This song was one of them. And as I was writing it, Inga looked at me and I looked at her and she was like, this song really ain't for French. This song's for you. And I said, well, that's my sister. I'm gonna let her have the tune. But then the record ended up not coming out. And so years went by and I was like, I'm just gonna start singing it. Because I think we did this in 2002. I'm just gonna start singing it. And so I started singing it with my band in French, and I talked about it and she agreed. And then my drummer at the time, Biscuit Bynum, had this amazing track that felt like it was home to this record. And so then I sung it again over their production. And then years later, I decided I really wanted to hear it live. And so I went into the studio with Randy Runyon, Reuben Kaner, and Louis Cato. And if you look up those names, they are absolutely music and tour royalty. They're just amazing players. And so they replayed the record over for me. And then I tweaked the bridge section to fit a new energy for myself. And it was so funny. I guess it's biographical. You know what I mean? Heart of a champion, been through the storm, just standing there listening. And then I was reborn. It was me talking about the places and spaces I've been. But I mean, by the time I wrote that record, I was in my early 30s and I still had a story to tell even then. I hadn't even yet been divorced. Things were actually looking good. But before then, I still had a story to tell. And I think that it made its way into that record. And I said to myself, I was not going to put out The Ceremony without there being a How I Got Over tune. So in essence, the ending of my story is the top of my storytelling. in the ceremony, which is why I started with legend. And then I got into creatures, you know, where I'm kind of reclaiming my right to just simply enjoying how amazing I am, we are. And when you talk about creatures, you know, we can get back to that conversation where everybody's trying to get back to this specific vibration. You know, you want to say I'm a monster, but then you kind of want to be me. You want a bite of this life. You want to taste this amazing part of it. You stay up late at night trying to figure out how you can get back to this vibration. You know, it's that portion of the song where it says, hey, yo, we better weather trendsetters, all about them 4 letters, LOVE. Can't you see that's this where you should be, babe? That this is where you should be. This is where you want to be. You know, come crawl into the time of your life. You know, there's just something and a certain magic that we wield in this world that everybody wants to be about, that vibration, that Rosetta Stone of actual cultural and spiritual greatness that we are. So that's creatures for me. And I had to get back to remembering that that was amazing and okay to say in the world out loud. Drugs was the beginning of me telling the absolute truth about where my journey with finding and reclaiming my own heart started. And then I didn't want to keep running my mouth. I wanted to make sure you didn't have another question before I move forward, because I know I've been.
Oh no, you're good. I like how you're going song by song. If you don't mind skipping around a little bit.
Not at all.
So I'm really digging Backseat of My Star. That's one of my favorite records.
Thank you.
Look, I know the meaning, but the wordplay is amazing. But you got to break it down. I love that song.
I'm gonna break it down. The truth is, so my partner, Takala, and I have a group together called MI7. And so MI7 stands for My Infinite Heaven. And over the last 2.5 years, we have been recording songs everywhere we've traveled in the world, from Florence, Italy to, Cape Town, South Africa. We have been recording songs together. And usually these songs are recorded in bed. So he will produce a song and then roll over and be like, babe, wake up. Record this real quick. And I will freestyle the songs first. The very first thing that's on my mind, I start singing it. Doesn't matter. And so he records that. And all of our songs are off my very first idea. We later maybe tweaked them, but Backseat was something that just kind of like was born on its own of a specific moment in our relationship, which I will leave at that. But because I'm a little ratchet and because he's a Virgo and remembers that we do want to be role models, said instead of backseat of my car, he said, baby, why don't you say backseat of my star? And I was like, well, I'm real. I'm going to say backseat of my car. That's where it happened. I'm going to say it. And he was like, backseat of my star, baby. So that's how Backseat of My Star was born. And then I later went and did another iteration of it in the studio in DC, where I had a chance to like just really add in the background vocals and really pay attention to the spaciness of love when a person first connects with another human being like that, disrobe your cool, I wanna see you so better, make you feel better, there are no rules, just an ultimate universe where my love spells out release, courtesy of my backseat. So anyway, just I wanted to weave.
Whoa, you can't stop right there. You can't stop. You can't stop right there. See, Willie, I told you, I love that song.
Thank you. Well, it was so so funny because sometimes I'll say to Takala, take off your pants so I can see your soul better. So a lot of this, we're all these
free game, Willie. Free game to the wife.
Free game, a little bit Mary Makeba, a little bit Cardi B. I'm not here to lie about what I am. And so I said, how can I say this without being as literal as a millennial? And I wanted to create that. Now that we're on the backseat of a star, let me really think about this with more consideration. And, sometimes when you're making love, it literally is like an out-of-body experience. And so coming from the perspective of that, I wanted to weave backgrounds that made you feel like you were floating in space. And so I hope that I accomplished that. I wanted for people to hear this record. And I think that MI7's purpose is for people to get back to celebrating the eternal crush. What it's like to love somebody and eternally crush on them. We still slow dance to Wu-Tang, you know? So the MI7 record is our attempt at getting the rest of the world to do that too. And Backseat of My Star was just my way of introducing everybody else to that idea of love, Black love, in that way that's sensual and beautiful. We can talk about that without being so heavy and literal.
I want it to be said right here, all listeners, all couples, make sure you put Backseat of My Star on repeat. All the arguments will stop. All the back and forth will just stop for a second.
I got to cue it up now.
Repeat. You got to cue it up.
Cue it up right now. And then follow
we
it up
know
with Fly Me to the Universe. That's why I got Fly Me to the Universe right after it. You ain't got to stop the tape. You can keep going.
I literally just text my wife like, hey, listen to this album right now.
Listen. Yeah, I know we're going to be responsible for some kids from between Backseat and Fly Me to the Universe. They're both trouble. Good trouble.
But the good kind of trouble.
Yeah, the best type of trouble. Is one of the things I like about Fly Me to the Universe, which is interesting because my mother is a songwriter, always been a songwriter, and every once in a while she'll send me these voice memos, and they're so adorable. And it'll be her singing something, you know, and she'll be saying, "Oh, hold me, baby," just anything, you know. She sings it on a voice memo and send it to me, and it's so cute to hear her sing these little naughty songs, right? Well, one day my mom sent me a heater, at least the beginning of what I could make into something that was about to be ridiculous. And she says, "Lay the pillow beneath my head, put my body on the bed, fly me to the universe." And I said, "Woman, I think, one, I don't want to know you act like this, but I really appreciate this verse." And so, you know, my mother, who is a master educator, who is a songwriter, who was a woman ahead of her time, who didn't pursue it, occasionally talks about wondering where her legacy is going to be in this world. And so it was important to me to use that verse because it was a banger. Like it was an amazing start. And two, it just felt good to give my mom her first writing credit in a record and to have her create a publishing name.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And, you know, then I freestyle wrote the rest of the tune and then tweaked it. And, you know, then you have Fly Me to the Universe, and Biboswa, who is from Senegal, you know, just made an amazing track for me to sing over. And one thing a lot of people do not know about the ceremony is one of the people contributed to all the mixes was Raheem Devon. Raheem refused to let me quit. I was really talking about just quitting and scrapping the record one day. And he was like, "Well, what do you need? What resources do you need?" And he says, "Well, I have an amazing engineer who mixes all my stuff. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna pay for your mixes. I'm gonna pay for your mixes. And if you need to record some more, I'm gonna let you record." Because I was recording some things with him, duets. We had done Roses together. And that's when we were talking about doing more music and also collaborating on possibly some other things. And he was like, "So what are you doing? Like, what's holding up your record? You've been recording forever." And by this time I'd been recording for 7 years, you know? He was like, "So what's the holdup?" You know, I'd been paying for these mixes in between tours and using the tours to finance the record, which is why it stretched itself out for so long. But also it was great because it gave me an opportunity to live and to write about what was happening, which is why you have the record you have. But to have a friend say to me, like, "Look, I know how much being sovereign means to you. I'm not trying to sign you or be your label unless you want that. But if what you sincerely need right now is just somebody to invest in this record, then go on here." Sent me to his engineer. I was in the recording records. I was able to get these records mixed. And that's why there's a ceremony, because somebody bet on a Black woman and then didn't try to dominate her by taking her record from her.
It's so amazing to hear about artists who don't forget where they come from and realize that, you know, there was a climb for me to get to where I'm at, and then they can reach back and say, "Let me help the next person get to where they're at. And so I want to ask you, who are you crushing on as far as what we deem the newer artists that are out today that are putting out music?
Man, some of them are new to you, but they're old to me, because we've all been, some of us in these circles, trying to get it for a long time. One of my favorites is Paak, who used to be my music director in LA. Whenever I was going to perform, I got footage of him playing Change Your Mind that I was looking at today. He's playing a singing background, singing my songs, just mind blowing. And
that is mind blowing.
Yeah, I love that brother. I actually just sent him the record last week, and I was like, I need a quotable. So like, I'm waiting for my quotable. And we've ended up coming in contact with one another on the road, and he's just amazing, and I'm super proud of him. I love her. I think
her is killing it.
Yeah, I think she did an incredible service to R&B music and brought it back into conversation. Her, artists like Khalid, these are artists that my son is listening to, and because he's listening to them, he wants to listen to Marvin Gaye. And now he listens to Phyllis Hyman. He loves You Know How to Love. He's 9. And because of these younger artists who are bringing back soulful music, people like me can be heard again. And I really appreciate that. Like I have the largest crush on people who bring folks back to music, like hip hop brought folks to Bob James. Who else? I mean, I love Duran, that goes without saying. He's family, and he's amazing.
He's incredible. Yeah.
He's been incredible forever. I remember when he was on YouTube and would send me like, emails or in this case, like a DM in MySpace, where he asked me to send him the track for a record I had called 4 Alarm Fire, and a record that I did on the Prelude called Where I Is, so he could cover it. So he covered my music, and he covered Erica's, and he put out a record called The Son of Badu, and that's how Erica found out about him. And he ended up singing background for her. So I've known Duran since he was chopping celery on his after-school job, and to see him become this thing, not only just this artist, but a personality where people are finding so much strength because he is a queer male, because he is standing in his power in that way. I'm so proud of him for being himself unapologetically, because 10 years ago, when I became aware of him, he didn't live in a world where he could exist. And now he is, and doing it unapologetically, and there are other people who can because of him. So I'm so freaking proud of him. And then on the side of female performers, there's so many. Like the landscape right now, I really feel like there's an amazing music that's coming forth. And not all of my favorite singers are flat foot singers who have runs and do etc. I love Jasmine Sullivan's new album, Hotels, is incredible, but I also love to listen to SZA, who just sings straight. And I love Summer Walker's live album. She has a song called Put It On Your Grave. Oh, love. For the longest time, I had no one to listen to, and now I do.
It's funny that you said your son listens to Marvin Gaye, because I've been called an old soul. I'm not really hip to a lot of, Alex knows this, I'm not really hip to a lot of the new artists like rap and all of that. So actually one of my favorite movie is The Temptations, because I love old school. I love Stevie Wonder. And it's funny, I remember picking my 4-year-old up from school before the pandemic, and his teacher was like, he's in here singing these old songs like you guys listen to at home. I'm like, yeah, that comes from me. But I have 2 questions for you, okay?
Yes.
First question is, it's a YahZarah movie being made. Who would you prefer to play YahZarah? That's the first question. And the second question is, I want you to give me your top 5 vocalists.
This is gonna sound horrible. I want to play myself.
Okay.
I want to play myself.
Which is smart, because you are an actress.
Exactly.
Yes. I've seen movies where Diana Ross played herself, and she's one of my archetypes. I love how she did it all. She was a mother. She was a business mogul. She was an actress. She's everything. My favorite singers right now. Oh man, there's singers I love for different reasons. There's a new singer that I love who sings this really amazing meditative music. I'm going to talk about her later. I'm going to name the people you know so that when I say her name, y'all can pay attention to her. I love her. I love her as pen. I love her as attention to details and learning how to be a real instrumentalist, that she can sit down at a piano and she can craft a song, that she can also get out from behind that piano and be sure of herself, that she can pick up a guitar and play that. I love that. And I love everything about her. Jasmine, I love because I've watched her grow. I remember when she and I did the Black Lily together when she was 14 years old. And Rich had myself, the Jazzy Fat Nasties, and Jasmine on the same show. And I was like, who the hell is this kid? And I was jumping up and down like a groupie. And the only thing I said to myself is they're not going to know what to do with her. And it's so great to see her now having stuck to her principles as a musician and as a vocalist and winning. Love her voice. I love SZA because I think she's a pop artist. And I wish we lived in a musical landscape where there wasn't any more race music, where everything got called R&B when there's a Black person standing beside it. I hate that and resent it highly. I think that that the R&B music was created to make sure that we didn't get a chance to level the playing field in rock and roll, blues, and electronic music, as well as pop. So I think it's shitty that she's never been nominated for a pop Grammy.
We started all that music anyway.
Belongs to us. That's a whole other conversation about appropriation, okay? But I was also glad to see a Black man. I'm trying to remember his name, and this is crazy because I've watched his brother. He used to call himself Blackball Universe, and now he's Weird Negro. He has a very revolutionary, like Negro is in his craft name, but he won a Grammy this year for Best Blues Album with Tank from Tank and the Bangers. So happy because only a year ago you couldn't get a Black person on the blues category. That's a big move. Who else? As a non-Black singer, I really love Billie Eilish. I think she has an incredible pen. She's very soulful in her own way. And then my most recent obsession is this young lady whose name is Wata, and you'll find her on Clubhouse. She's going to be putting out new music. I think she put something out recently. And if a crystal singing bowl and Bjork had a baby girl, this young Black girl from the Ivory Coast would be her. I love her music. It's soulful, it makes you feel good, and it's different. And I really love seeing so many of us branching out of these ideas of what we do. Like Black people don't make soulful music, or Black people don't make meditative music, or Black people don't make sonic music, or Black people don't play the singing bowls and sing soulfully over it. You know, even though Alice Coltrane, did that on a posthumous album, and you still didn't even see that nominated in a new wave space. So I'm excited about her. And was that 7? I stopped counting.
I think that was 6, but you got 5 though, right, Willie?
Yeah, but listen, I was listening to her. I like the whole list.
No,
she kept going as long as she want.
That was a great list. Here's a question for you. Mm-hmm. So as a vocalist, and I've always loved pure vocalists. But when you see artists who vocally, I remember my high school choir director said, the spirit is willing, but the talent is weak.
I've heard that again. You're so talented.
Mm-hmm. No, it's just like you work hard, but it's just not there. When you see artists shoot to the top of the pops, and in your mind, other artists deserve it, especially at the Grammys. How does that make you feel as an artist who put so much time and energy into your craft, and you're seeing other people get ahead because of many different reasons, whether it's skin color, connections, looks, that sort of thing, and it's not about the music?
I mean, it used to bother me, but it's none of my business. My job is to keep making the music I make and creating a landscape for me and my tribe to enjoy it, and not worrying about letting a statue tell me how nice I am. And if it blesses somebody else and that's their platform, then that's great. But I feel like if you keep doing the work, especially now that people can find you, and the gatekeepers that used to have control over who found who aren't in place, I can care less who's doing this, because I have an opportunity, if I want to curate my own space and do this with my tribe. Not everybody's going to love what you do. Music is subjective. There is some music that is made with a specific objective of being found and commercial in mind. I don't have a beef with it. In fact, what my job is to do is to find out how my greatness, my own personal commitment to my art, and that thing that if I want it so much, can occupy the same space. Not to hate on somebody else because they found the amalgamation of things that gets them there. You can't do nothing with that. What's that energy gonna do if I hate them for getting someplace I think I should be? Then get yourself there. The energy I'm spending on being upset for The Weeknd, or who didn't get nominated this year and pitched a fit like a 3-year-old. You know, imagine all the artists who are amazing, who deserve Grammys, who, you know, every year just keep doing the work. That's what I do. I don't get upset anymore. Also, because not everybody's going to be a singer. There's some really amazing music out here made by vocal stylists, and we need to be able to allow that stuff to exist too. We just need to level the playing field.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, all that energy, man, you're gonna block your own blessings. I ain't letting nothing keep me from where I'm going.
Speaking of, so you just released this album.
Yes.
Right. but you're not a one-dimensional person. You got multiple projects in the works. So talk about that. Talk about what's next for YahZarah. I'm guessing tour is definitely on the horizon, but what other projects are you working on?
Right now, I'm actually working on a Clubhouse tour. Funny thing you should say tour. And I'm going to do a Clubhouse tour. So I'm inviting people to hit me in my DMs. And if they have a room that they think they would like for me to share 2 or 3 songs from my record, and I'm going to where the people are, you know?
Dope. That is dope.
Yes, service my tribe. You want me? I'm willing to come. I'm also planning to do a series of living room concerts, socially distanced, for fans of mine who are tastemakers who want me to come to their city and perform for them in an acoustic setting. So that's happening, and I'm doing them as ceremonies, you know. So we talk about various issues of, you know, various conversations about reclamation and healing, and then I sing for them. So, you know, that's what my plan is. Also, Protector of the Gods. You know, this week I have my session to do my animated voice of Shekmet, and I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about that. Working on several musical projects. One I just did, the MI7 project is crazy, and it's a side of myself that people don't really get to see. I'm rhyming on that record. I'm talking about some very specific subjects. Some of them are amazing and peaceful. Others are extremely ratchet. But I am being myself, and in concert with my partner, and we're talking about love as we see it. And I think that's going to be a really special album for Black folks. Another series of songs I did with an amazing trumpet player named Brandon Woody would remind you of the Freedom Suite with Abby Lincoln and Max Roach. And these songs are no shorter than like 19 to 20 minutes. So there's songs in several movements. And so they'll be released in a visual series, because you can't just drop a record like that. You got to give it something so that people can experience it as well as hear it. And I'm very excited specifically about a record that we wrote called Breathe Freely, which we made at the height of the pandemic. And we had to make it live, but in separate rooms. And what was really incredible about this record is when we met in the main studio, you could tell that everybody was holding their breath, even though we were wearing masks, because we were afraid of breathing the air that belonged to one another freely. And I felt that energy almost instantly. And we were doing what was supposed to be a sound check that ended up turning into a really powerful song called Breathe Freely, where I talk about the right that we have as people of color to breathe freely in all spaces, to take back, you know, especially when folks talking about, I can't breathe, like I can't, what you give energy to expands. I can breathe. You're not stealing my breath. With every free inch I'm living with on this earth, I am going to breathe freely. So that record to me is an opportunity for us to have conversations about anxiety, about fear of being in space with one another, but also about our right as people of color to be free in all spaces. And so each record that we did kind of piggybacks on this idea of reclamation of our right to be happy and to be free in all spaces. And then lastly, I'm working with, well, actually two things. I'm doing a 3-song EP with my son, who is also a would-be producer and has 3 tracks that he's given me that we've worked on together. And he just surprises me with his ear that I'm going to be doing. So he and I are going to release a mother and son project together. And then I'm doing one with another friend of mine where he's a drummer, and he and I have 3 tracks that we're doing, but in between them, he's going to be doing solo stuff, and we're going to be trading my voice and his drums with production. His name is Swiss Chris, and he's played for everybody from John Legend to man, I can't think about everybody right now, but look up Swiss Chris.
That's gonna be a dope track. I've never heard that concept. That's
dope. And it's all hip hop. It's all hip hop and soulfully, I guess what you would call, what they're calling now alt R&B ideas. There's lots of guitars and electronic and synths, and it's us and 2 other younger brothers who are producing along with us. And I'm really excited about it. I'm really, really excited about that. That and MI7 are my 2 focuses for the summer.
What do you think about EDM?
I love EDM. I mean, I grew up going to phone parties in DC. Like, you know, there isn't, I mean, I love country music. You know, I could listen to Dolly Parton, whose pen was vicious, and people need to like, country music tells such amazing stories. EDM is just an energetic opportunity for you to get this energy out. You know, it is a powerfully energetic tool. And I just want to see more of us in it. Or more of us being celebrated in the space is a better word. Because we're influencing everything. It's just like they fly us to Korea to make K-pop.
So this has been incredible. Wow, this has been fun. First off, before I close this out, Willie, you got anything?
Yeah, I have one more question. I don't know if you ever thought about it, but looking at your life now, your journey, have you ever sat back and thought like, man, where would I be without music? Like, who would YahZarah be without music?
Not here.
That's a great question.
Not here. Not here. By virtue of the experiences I was having, specifically as a child, where I was being bullied to the point of wanting to die and was suicidal at the age of 7, you know, having to get my stomach pumped from the level of bullying I was experiencing from my own people who look like me. No, music saved my life, period. End of story. Duke Ellington School of the Arts, having a place to hone that skill and to be in space with other people who were like myself and just be able to concentrate on being great, saved my life. Going out with Erykah Badu and allowing myself to spread my wings instead of staying at the time in the oppressive college environment, which it was becoming because I tried to do both. Stepping out on faith and making that music is why I'm here. You know, going out with Lenny Kravitz and letting my son go someplace else so that I could actually be a self-actualized human being in his presence saved my life. That's it.
Wow. Real quick, last night I heard you talk about ayahuasca.
Yes.
I saw the ceremony. So there's a show that I like to watch on Showtime. It has nothing to do with that, but they had a part on it where 2 guys were in a tent with a shaman and they were having that. And I honestly didn't know what it was at the time, but I heard you talking about it. And you also talked about meditation. Mm-hmm. Can you give me a little bit more context on what that is and what that does for cleansing and healing?
I think anytime you get a chance to still your mind, at least for me, which is hard because I have all these ideas going on between these 2 years, there's a lot of things that are happening that are incredible. Some of them are also lies that I tell myself about myself that I have to decipher through, and meditation helps you to like calm down what they call that monkey voice. The monkey voice is the voice that tells you stuff that's not true. That, you know, when they say idle mind is the devil's workshop, meditation is to quiet the mind so that you can focus your energy on the stuff that can build you. And sometimes, you know, it's just like when you were in the car with your parents and you were playing your music up loud and they said, can we just sit in silence for a moment? I don't know if that ever happened to you, but it used to happen to me because I love to play the radio in the car on the way to school. And my mom would be like, I just need 20 minutes of silence. And I would be outraged. But now I'm the mom that says, hey, let's steady our minds. Let's just take a few minutes to go underneath the surface where we can hear our thoughts clearer. You know, that's what meditation does for me. And it doesn't have to be all super woo-woo. Sometimes it's just a song that brings me into the quiet of the space for myself. Or going to the park and sitting beside a lake and being by myself. Sometimes it's just curling up with my sweetheart and watching a movie. Meditation is very different things, but it's taking a moment to be still and allowing that to be okay. And as that stillness happens, you know, thoughts will come and they will go. But when you're sitting in the quiet with yourself or whatever gives you stillness, it gives you an opportunity to allow new ideas to come, to let other things that need to be breathed out of your space go. You know, I recommend anybody who comes home from work, if you got kids who are old enough to make themselves a meal and wash some dishes, you say hello to them, you walk your behind up the steps, you close the door, you take 20 minutes to just breathe. And you recommend it for them too, because children who meditate become people who have a better opportunity to be able to hear their thoughts too. Especially with all these tablets and video games and Roblox and stuff around, they need it just as badly. I have to force myself sometimes. Oh, dude, the things my son did for Roblox this summer, man, nearly got him killed. For real?
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Mom, can I have 9 Robux? Did you ever do the math on how much Roblox costs? I'm not going off on a tangent, but what I realized was what it became to children during the pandemic was an opportunity to connect with one another. It became what they thought was meditation, but it actually became an addiction because you're on there and they have Prada, they got Gucci, they have all these things on Roblox for these babies. Okay. And in Robux in regular,
Look at Alex's face when you said that.
Yeah, the kids playing for Gucci on it. And so they're buying these NFTs for lack of for a real technical word. And it costs $9.99 to get 4,500 Robux. And they may have a Valkyrie helmet on there that costs 54,000 Robux. And these babies are losing their minds if they can't wear the right thing so that they become the big person on campus in a cyber world that doesn't even exist. That's a scary thing. So part of meditation is put you in a space as well to still your mind so that you can decipher the truth from the lies, because that same thing happens to us in the real world. You know, I became more understanding of it for us when I watched my son going through that. Am I enough? I'm not enough. Let me make sure I can buy these like new Balenciaga tennis shoes that they put on Roblox today, so I can be the big dude in X world in Roblox. Meditation helps us ground that energy that says we're not enough. Silence those voices that make us feel like we need things that we don't. And for me, it's imperative because sometimes even in this business, you can fall into the sin or the illusion of comparison. One person's reality as an artist versus your reality. And are you doing well? You know, because they're doing better, you know, are you not doing well? Meditation helps me to remember who I am. I hope I made sense.
Episode. No, you made a lot of sense. And that's another episode in and of itself, because I've always wondered behind the scenes, especially touring, what that experience is like. But even as a solo artist, the comparison, and you might not do it yourself, but media is doing it, right? Social media is doing it. In fact, I think it was Wednesday, I saw somebody write, this artist is better than this artist, or this artist eats this type of artist for breakfast. And I'm like, see, that type of comparison, and I know it wasn't meant to do that because we're all musicians and artists, but it's just like somebody else could take that one way because they're also an artist and they're comparing themselves to those people that you're mentioning. And it just becomes this big cycle of like you just said, it doesn't allow you to exist in your own space.
I mean, if you let it, it will. I can't be you. You can't be me. What I'm here to give, I came to give. What you came to give, you came to give. And yeah, this industry can really make people feel like there's only a few of us that can make it, and that, we have to fight for our spots, and that's scarcity. And that's another gift given to us by white men to keep us from building bridges. Period. You have to really, and it takes a while. Like the conversation I'm having with you now is not one that all of a sudden I woke up feeling like I was enough. And some mornings I still wake up not feeling like I'm enough. The difference is I know how to remedy that feeling. And I also know not to make any sudden moves just because I'm feeling that way. How many people go to visit their brother or sister-in-law and they look around their house and they feel like they're not enough because their family member has been able to buy a house, but they can't? There's always going to be something shifting your focus towards not being grateful for what you got. And for me, on just a human level, because it's so easy with all of these shows that show who's living where and who's driving what and who's boning who, because they have all that stuff. It's very easy to absolutely forget how blessed you are.
Whew, man, I don't even know where to go from there. I think that's a perfect segue to close out. But before we do, you just gave so much, but
I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, you were great. First off, thank you for taking the time out of your night to come sit down with the Black Culture Podcast. Thank you so much.
You gave me an excuse to get dolled up, and these days I don't get too many. So
okay. First off, did you enjoy yourself?
Of course. I've been sitting here nursing my little glass of wine, and you guys gave me an excuse to open up my Cali Red 19 Crime Snoop brand.
Yeah. All right,
so Black today. So thank you. 19 Crime.
So he just had.